Is it okay?
Jeff Pulver, and welcome back to another edition of Ask the Oracles, because it's Monday. Oh my goodness, we have a very special guest, and we'll give a shout out to our audience that's joining us, and
Hey,
Lauren
everybody.
and Monty, Amy. How are you? How was your week? Any new books written?
Yeah, as a matter of fact, two of them we've been working on. I know it's sick. We're working on the Karmic Birthday book, and we're also working on my book that teaches you astrology, how to read an actual chart. I sometimes have some people joining us here who have taken the class, and I had so much fun doing it.
You never did that before.
No, I never did, and it was a lot of fun. And so I'm trying to, encapsulate that kind of experience. How about you, Jeff? What's up with you?
I am
You
working.
had a conference or three this week?
Yeah, no, I'm working on a conference, about to announce something else, and I came up with some new ideas, which over the weekend, which I will talk to you about later. But all good, all good. I'm working on extending and growing community is really the bottom line. How to bring together more people around topics which we all are passionate about, and so
That's good.
Yes, it's the antidote to the elitists and the World Economic Forum.
Wait, happy President's Day.
Happy President's Day.
That's as political as we get, right?
And happy Pluto return. The United States had their Pluto return yesterday. Still going on. I mean, Pluto goes, I think it's 246 years since we had Pluto where it is today.
It's interesting how that's manifesting in the Ukraine and Russia.
Well, yeah, the United States, our country here in the United States. I know we go to a lot of different countries here on Ask the Oracles, but our country was not formed in a vacuum. So it's not surprising that there's a lot of big things going on with other countries. But we're excited because we have one of our favorite people joining us.
Brandy, welcome.
Thank you.
And we're going to talk about laws of nature, laws of society, because Brandy's a returning guest on our show, and she's so interesting because she was in law enforcement before she became a full-time reader. So we love that background because Monty's family was in law enforcement, and that gives you a real street smart cred, which I think, right?
I know it's
a different way of reading people, and that's what we want to talk about today. What are natural laws? There's all kinds of issues of justice now, and who's right and who's wrong. And going back to natural laws, natural metaphysical laws, which are the laws of karma, the law of cause and effect, the law of polarity
and synchronicity.
Yeah. So what do you think? Where should we jump in with that?
I don't know. Brandy's the guest, so she gets to jump in wherever she wants.
Brandy's never lost words.
You know me too well. So, I mean, I do work a lot with natural law. And as a Hermetic Kabbalist, I mean, we look at the 7 Hermetic principles of natural law, right? That's how everything in the universe works. I try, and when we talk about like justice and fairness, when we break down, because it is a natural principle, right? And a lot of people don't know, I actually taught criminal justice as well at the university level, and even taught high school for a year.
As one day. Wow.
And so
God,
I taught high school for a year. I taught law enforcement, career and tech. Whenever I left law enforcement, I thought, well, I got to make a smooth transition. Like I got to go into reading full time. And so I went to go teach, and I thought, well, hell, if I can teach college kids, I can teach high school kids. That was entertaining. But I was a favorite, so that worked in my favor. But when we talk about justice and natural laws, when we think about the word justice, it breaks down into fair society. And fairness, right, when we look at like the breaking down of just the word fair or fairness, it talks about natural cyclic things. What is fair? What goes around comes around. That's a fair statement that we make, right? And so for me, when we talk about natural laws, it's that. What's the basis? Forget all of the labels that get applied to you or to our society. How does it operate? how does it naturally occur? If we were to take ourselves out of the current environment that we're in and we were to go somewhere foreign, like, have you ever seen Naked and Afraid? The show.
I know what it
people get-
is. I know what it
Okay,
is.
where they get naked and they go out and they're 21 days somewhere in a foreign a landscape. Sometimes it's even in the United States they've have them, but they're putting them out and, you know, like Arizona in the middle of the desert, right? So you're taking something out of its natural element, the element it is naturally and now, and you're putting it in what might be considered an unfair state because it doesn't have the advantage that it did. It hasn't naturally acclimated to that environment. You can't naturally, maybe at the end of 21 days, you've learned how to survive. But when you first go into it, you're not acclimated to the, you know, Sahara Desert or to the jungles of Guatemala. Like, that's not something you're accustomed to. That's where natural law comes into play. When you take something and you stick it in an environment where the rules of engagement are different, that's where you see natural law at its finest. And you can either move with it. You know, when we go, like, let's say we're going to use Guatemala, the Guatemalan jungles, right? Let's say we just take Amy and we stick her in Guatemala. She's in the jungle. She's by herself, right? She's dressed in her purples to the nine. She's going to stand out. Why? Because she's in purple. She's in a different backdrop, right? So the rules of engagement, the natural laws that apply here in the States in her normal life no longer apply. She has to adjust to the new natural laws. What happens there? She's no longer the head, you know, predator. She is now prey. And now she stands out. So she can adjust. She can dip her clothes in the mud. And now she doesn't stand out quite as much, right? Put some mud in the hair, get rid of the purple. Do you know what I'm saying? But then it might become an advantage actually to be purple because there are certain poisonous creatures that are in the Guatemalan jungles, right? That it's by their color, the frogs, that typically stand out. So it's, when we talk about natural law, it's about whatever's naturally there, regardless of where you are. These are things that are going to happen: predator and prey, growth, death, rebirth. You know, you light a jungle on fire in Guatemala or you burn California to the ground. Nature is going to work its same way back, right? It's going to come back from the seeds. It's going to come back from the burnt soil. So when we talk about things like fair justice, fair society, things like that, it's what strips it down to the core. The basics. Forget everything that we've built up over the years. Forget everything that we've applied to us physically, mentally, emotionally, spiritually. What are the core essences that run through every society across this planet, every area, anything you can think of? There are core elements. And if you can learn to work with those, the rest of it you just build.
Yes, I agree. And when you're confronted with this newness, like we have with the pandemic, we've had to use our intuition to navigate the new landscape. I mean, that's the crux of it, right? I guess are all these laws intrinsic in humans?
Yeah.
What's morally correct or not?
Well, and so here's one thing that, you know, I'm not sure how well everybody's adept with Hermetic Kabbalah, but the whole point is to remain centered. It is to neither swing to the left or the right, the black or the white. Like I used to teach people about law enforcement. Law enforcement is not black nor white. It is gray. It's a whole lot of area of gray. Even the laws, the statutes that we have out there, believe it or not, there's a lot of gray area. And so we have precedents that says if someone commits this crime, you must at a minimum, you know, sentence them 2 to 10 years, right? And so when we talk about, like, is it intrinsic within us? Is this something natural? To some degree, yes. If somebody cuts off your hand, you know, in other countries, it's the rightful thing to cut their hand off too. Do you know what I'm saying? And that's the, you know, Code of Hammurabi, eye for an eye, tooth for a tooth. That is the oldest written law that we have. And so you talk about, to some degree it is, because it's been generationally built into us. And it is natural. Like, if you hurt me, I'm going to hurt you. And not necessarily out of a vengeance. Sometimes it can be, but sometimes it's a natural reaction. If somebody punches you, your natural reaction is punch back or defend yourself. Like, that is just, there is part of an intrinsic response, that fight or flight. And so when we get into things like this pandemic, things that a lot of us have never faced before, there's in what I like to call an activation of underlying ancestral trauma, or ancestral knowledge, depending on where it is. Not everybody has experienced that trauma before, right? But certain areas of the world have had lockdowns like this before, for whatever reason, some of them not so old. And so it depends on what your knowledge base is built on. And when we talk about what is responsive, reactive and responsive, it depends. It doesn't necessarily have to come from you, but if you were raised a certain way because your great grandmother was treated a certain way or went certain ways, you're going to be raised in a different way. So things like now will cause you to respond or react depending on previous experiences, maybe not even ones that you had. When you talk about intuition, Amy, that's what I tell people: follow your intuition above all else. If something smells like crap, it's probably crap. Like that's a big thing.
Well, I think it's such an interesting time we live in where people can react. That's true, that's a lie, that's just, that's unjust. And we're all like churning inside because there's so many confrontations like that every second, right? Whether it's the news or, so I think when you want to follow your heart, but they're saying something else out there, it's a challenge, right, Jeff?
I think they're always,
Speaking of justice.
it's, I mean, listening to Brandy, I mean, there's so much information to be shared, and there's lots of context to be aware of and to be conscious of. And when you're in those moments of fight or flight, what do you do? What's the best, culturally, what's the best way to defend? Perhaps everyone will inclinedly defend themselves, but sometimes we do run away because maybe this is not our fight at the moment, because we'll come back with a ready force to fight when we're ready, and then will be a fairer fight because we were ambushed. So rather than fight an ambush, we retreat, and then energetically, we go forward and we find perhaps a better way to reach the goal, whether it's self-defense or whether it's something at a higher level. I do think that, I would like to believe, and I don't know if it's true, whether there's balance in the universe, that for every bad there's good, for every good there's bad, that there's as you say, we live in the gray, right? We live not necessarily in the white or the black, but in the in between, the contextually, and that's, there's context for all of that. And while you were talking about energy and putting Amy in the Guatemalan rainforest, I was thinking about what if you guys found yourself on a desert island and you had to run a startup, and you had to make all the decisions necessary to launch your company, to get funded, to pivot, to find your product, to find that product market fit, and to actually go. That's
a good show.
Yeah, it'd be, desert island survival / get your money company funded or you're dead. Because you don't have food to pay for the food, to fly in the food from where you want your food. I don't know. But the idea is that if you gamify it and know that you can solve for it, and that it is solvable. How we make decisions before, will impact how our future is impacted. And the more knowledge we have, sometimes the harder it is to do the planning, because we have that experience. Experience is wonderful because it teaches us things, but sometimes it blinds us. And they're particularly when you're dealing with cosmic laws and karmic laws and natural laws, sometimes not knowing can give you an edge up, because you don't have that fear, because you're not afraid of what can be.
Oh, I absolutely agree.
We want to feel like we have the freedom to choose and make decisions, but a lot is changing, right? In terms of laws or people that are trying to control the laws. Like Michelle Marie was just saying, in Seattle, they've decriminalized crime in a lot of ways, and that's changed the landscape where she lives.
Yeah.
We're seeing it sweep across the nation.
Yeah.
So we're kind of confronted, is that right? Is it wrong? Is it,
Well,
does it conform
and
to what you know inside?
what I tell people is there is no right or wrong. There is only truth. And the problem with only being truth is that everybody's truth is different. It depends on your experience. What is true for one person is not true for another.
Yes.
And it goes back, I'm going to hit real quick on something Jeff said first. When you talk about not knowing, like having too much information can get in your way. There are times that I do readings for people that I intentionally withhold information, because what their guides are telling me is, here's what they need to know, but they don't need to know this right now because it will alter the way in which things are going to go. And I have to respect that and say, and if they ask me, sometimes I just have to say, no, I don't know. Right.
Yeah.
Because you can have information that, I tell, I think it's on a blog post or something. I use this analogy all the time. Two of them, one of them about the Matrix, right? We do live in the holographic universe, but then I talk about, there's a movie from, I think it's like the 90s, maybe early 2000s. It was Ashton Kutcher, and it's The Butterfly Effect, how every single solitary thing has a consequence. And this isn't something that's some new age concept. This goes back literally thousands upon thousands upon thousands of years. It's been taught across the world in many indigenous communities, regardless of what it's called. And so you have to be careful about even the smallest things. The things we're talking about right here, right now, may not seem like it. How many people? We have 39 participants in here. May not seem like it has some far-reaching thing. But you never know. One person could pick up one thing in here they needed to hear, and that goes on to change their life and the people around them, which has a ripple effect. So I do agree, Jeff. Like, there is a time and point where you can have too much information, and this is where discernment and discretion comes in. Okay, so back to Amy's thing. You're asking about what, Amy? I got sidetracked again. You were talking about.
Oh, I don't remember.
Well, you were talking about decriminalization and where that comes in, like right and wrong. And I know I don't remember the exact question, but we were talking about truths. Everybody's truth is different, and it depends on, what is somebody's individual truth? What is their experience? What is true for them because of the things that they have experienced, because of the ways that they grew up? That is completely different than somebody else's, right? Mm-hmm. So if you were to ask me, what is my well, here, I'll use an example. Amy, what do you think about the rulership in Uganda right now?
That's a hard one, because I don't know.
Lonnie,
I don't have an opinion.
What do you think about the rulership in Uganda?
I'm still in shock thinking of Amy in the Guatemalan jungle.
She wants to put me all over the world.
And to us, sharing a bathroom is camping out. So I don't know enough. I don't know enough about the Ugandan leadership since Idi Amin left. So
bag of apples.
Jeff, what about you? Anything?
We have Idi Amin also, so things can't be as horrible as it used to be with him tonight. I hope.
So here's, and I'm using this as a case in point. Most people don't know about Uganda, right? My background is in law enforcement intelligence. It's in federal law enforcement intelligence. I specified originally the African continent, Southeast Asia, and there's a couple other, the Middle East, are my areas of specialty, particularly as it relates to terrorism and transnational organized crime. Uganda, Africa has a huge part of my heart. I love Africa. I must have had multiple lifetimes there, is what I've always said, because it's very near and dear to me. Uganda is a place that I have to be careful of my words here. I'm very familiar with. Okay. And so there's something there that's called the LRA. It's the Lord's Resistance Army. It is a Christian terrorist organization built off of children's soldiers, right? They go in, they kidnap these children, they kill people, they turn them in, they force them into soldiers. And so to this day, even though I've been out of the game for a bit, I still get on and I watch the LRA watch. I watch and see what's happening with Joseph Kony, which is the one that founded this in the 80s, right? And so my truth, when it comes to when somebody asks me, how's the state of the world? Some people might look and see what's going on with Russia, what's going on with Ukraine, what's happening now. And part of that is part of what I did, right? Because we're talking about foreign intelligence. But I always go back to, what's the state of Uganda? Have we addressed the problems there? Have we addressed the fact that we have child soldiers in the thousands at this point? So my truth, when people ask, what's the state of the world? My answer is, it's crap. Have you seen what's going on in, Uganda? Have you paid attention what's going on in Sudan? Have you paid attention to Tanzania? Those sorts of things. But most people are going to go, have you seen what's going on in the Ukraine? Do you see what I'm
No,
saying?
most people are going to say, have you seen the Super Bowl?
Well, that too. Yeah, there's that. There's the Super Bowl. And there's I don't watch the news. I don't keep up.
Me
And when
neither.
I do not watch American news. I watch BBC America, which is very biased against the United States, which is fine because it lets me know people's interpretations of our country. I also watch and keep up with Al Jazeera America, which is your Middle Eastern reporting on what's going on in the States. It gives you a good outside perspective of how people feel about the US. What are the thought processes? What do they think about what's going on? So I'm using this extreme example for a reason. Truth is different for each individual based off of their experiences. Most people would not look at me and think that she gets up every day and she's concerned about what's happening in Africa. Like, that's not something that most people would consider. Most people are, like you said, Monty, they're focused on Super Bowl. They're focused on 4th of July is coming up. There's, and this is the 4th of July that we're open, we've been open in Texas pretty much the whole time. But, for a lot of people, this is the first Independence Day in 2 years that we've had, 2 years. So truth and staying in that center it depends on the person. Depends on their experiences, depends on the way they were raised, depends on what's important to them. And here's where it really depends. Despite our past experiences, what the hell are you doing with it? Are you sitting in old stuff? Are you continuing to grow? Are you willing to look at it and say, well, maybe my truth needs to be adjusted a little. Maybe I have new information and that truth is no longer valid. Maybe I was in the white area and I've learned something new and it's moved me into that gray area. I'm no longer white nor black. I'm in the middle. And that's the whole point. We do this, right? Prayer position, hand position, things like that's what it's about. That centeredness, that being able to stay and challenge your own thoughts. You have to be able to challenge what you think you know. And I do that daily because if you don't, you stop growing. You stop growing. What's the point of being here?
Let's talk about the law of attraction, which we happen to have an oracle based on that idea, because that becomes more personal rather than global. Of what you put out comes back to you. Not to talk about punishment because I think that's very misunderstood. But the law of attraction, that you got sick because you had a negative thought, or I think, the mind, body, spirit, it's all tied in, but it's more complex than, just being punished somehow. You get sick or something bad happens. But the idea that it's energy, it's what you were talking about, the butterfly effect. We are all connected and we want to know our place here. We want to use our gifts. We want to grow. We want to be centered in the decisions that we make and the relationships that we have. What do you think?
What do I think? I think there's too many laws, and I think that's one. You combine the fact that there's been 246 years of lawmaking in this country, and now they're not enforcing them because Soros put all these DAs in, like the one who's being recalled in Los Angeles. And I'm talking about the liberal, he's so bad, the liberals, the people that would normally identify as liberals want this guy taken out because he doesn't give jail time. I always come back to the individual. It's why I make oracles for people, for individuals, to empower individuals. My oracles wouldn't work on the children soldiers. They've been traumatized beyond anything I can imagine.
Well, sometimes things are so big or there's so much control to be up against, you feel disempowered to make decisions.
Oh yeah, when you got people telling you if you don't wear a mask or if you have to get stuck with something. I mean, in the United States and in Canada and Australia and a lot of places, right now it's between liberty and tyranny. And that's the war that's going on now. And our freedoms do not come from the government. And the laws from the government are not the same as the natural laws that say everyone is entitled to be free. I can't help it. As an Aquarius, that's how I feel.
We know.
A little bit of, since we don't talk about health or politics on the show, we gotta be careful, mindful of our boundaries.
Well, this is true. But at the same time, one of the natural laws is if you get pushed into a corner, and a wounded animal is the worst animal to come up against. You know, even
Absolutely.
yeah. So when you see elderly women being trampled by horses, that raises something. That raises my hackles. As I said, I come from a law enforcement background, and to see the police being used as a weapon of tyranny is very hard for me.
So
Well, you want power to the people.
Yes, but not.
Here's the problem. I'm not going to touch politics. I'm not going to touch religion, and I'm not going to touch health. I will keep it as a general category.
Okay.
When it comes to things like this, I've already told you, I dealt with transnational crime. I dealt with terrorism. I dealt with the other part of this. You know, terrorism is foreign and domestic.
Sure.
And using the police as a weapon of terrorism is a very real thing. And we've seen it time and time again throughout the world. And not just the police, but whatever you want to call them. Because
the army too. The army too. If you go back in history, you'll find that the army was used during World War I. Soldiers were promised a particular bonus for fighting in World War I, and they actually came to Washington to petition for redress of grievances. And MacArthur and Eisenhower were the army people at that time who they actually fired on these people who had come.
And that's the issue, is that we have taken it's not something new. We've used this forever, right?
Yeah.
But the thing is that I tell people is that, you know, regardless of what you see.
Hold on one second. We're in our in our loving oracle that we always are, getting some chat here that's people are getting a little bit stressed by the conversation.
Okay,
feeling
well,
like they're watching the news.
Let's go back to the law of
let me de-stress it real quick, because this is how I think that anybody that wants to be in a metaphysical community, that wants to be more spiritually aware, enlightened, regardless of your religious beliefs, this is what I tell people. First of all, turn off the news. Stop looking at it. Okay? Because looking at it, all it's going to do is it's going to cause your cortisol levels to go through the roof, right? You don't want that to happen. That's stress on the body. When it comes to the actual laws in place, we're at a breaking point right now throughout the world. But here's the deal. Do something about it. You know, get out there and vote. Get out there and do what you can do. And it does not, you know, nobody says go out in the streets. Nobody says march. Nobody, you do what you feel called to. Just do it. And I'm coming from a law enforcement perspective here. Do it in a respectful and peaceful manner. Not all law enforcement agencies are the bad guys. Not all law enforcement agencies nor officers are, you know, racist. They're not tyrannical. They're none of those things. So I agree we need to switch topics, but I will leave it at that. Do what you can do. Be a civilian, right? Be a person. You know, and my generation's notorious for it. You know, I'm 36 and I voted in every election that I can vote in, because I was raised that you don't get to say you have an opinion if you don't voice that opinion. You can't say, you know, especially being a female, right? We haven't always had the right to vote. And then you have minorities who didn't either. And so wherever you are in the world, whatever country you're in, get out there and use your voice in a appropriate manner. And I'm not saying don't go out and march. I'm not saying don't go out and peacefully protest. I'm not saying don't stand up against tyranny where tyranny is. What I'm saying is use your brain. Do it the right way, because force only goes so far. And it doesn't matter. I mean, let's say we take over tomorrow. Let's say we all join the trucker convoy, right?
Listen, Brandy, I appreciate it, but I'm having an audience that's getting ready to leave.
Okay, go.
So it's important, and I understand what you're saying, and I understand how you want to how you want to frame everything, but for better or for worse, this is an audience that comes each week to be enlightened about what they can look for in the positive end of the world. And all of
That's
this
the-
stuff is very, but this is
Yeah.
very negative for some people. And that's why we avoid politics, because not everybody has the ability
agree.
to do what you're doing and to be able to synthesize it and separate it. So forcing this group of people to do that without saying this is what we're going to do isn't okay. If we're going to have this conversation, we need to write out a flyer that says this is the topic today. Come and join us and understand how it all works in there.
That works.
Well, the natural law is that it's always a good idea to be a good, positive person. I mean, that goes without saying. But the natural law is that there are people out there who are damaged also. You know, when Brandy's talking about the jungle, we don't live in the jungle. We live in a wonderful country. There's a lot of wonderful things going on.
Well, we always stress the positive.
Yeah.
But so like back to natural law, the law of attraction, which we talk about in different ways. What you put out comes back to you. How do you plan that, or what? I mean, we have an oracle that's based on that gives you messages. And
Well,
let's come back to doing readings and navigating using our intuition about. Sometimes you have to be aware of your thought process, and I guess what just transpired here. We have to think about what we're putting out and how it's being perceived. And thank you, everyone, for sharing your reactions, because that's what this is all about. And also, we have to examine why this upsets us, because we're talking about real things that we're all confronted with every day. And there's not really we don't want to escape from it. We want to know what's going on, and how to read the energies, but it's what energies you choose to bring in, right, into your mind and into your body.
Right. I think today's conversation is one of the most important, and what Brandy said is 100% true. I personally love police. This is because I grew up loving a police sergeant father. So
people are scared already. So it's like a confrontation. People don't like conflict or confrontation, that maybe they're doing something wrong, or maybe they have to do something that they're not doing.
No. All you got to do is breathe deeply and let your intuition guide you, right? I mean, you're talking about Hermetic Kabbalah. Hermetic, the word Hermetic, like hermetically sealed, comes from Hermes, Mercury, which is communication. So as long as we're all communicating, and as long as we're all thinking about trying to make things better, because being afraid is never a great idea. Even the Naked and Afraid show, I'm sure being afraid is not good on that stuff.
And that's part of what, when you were saying natural law is always positive, and I said, no, not necessarily. Natural law
No,
is
not necessarily.
Yeah, it's neither positive nor negative. And we place positive and negative in the wrong context. Like, we think of negative as punishment, and it's not. We talk about, we've placed a lot of contextual labels on things and definitions that don't really apply. So when we talk about natural law, we talk about, again, remove those labels. If you take a seed from a fruit and you dry it out, and then you plant it in the ground, and you've properly tilled the soil and fertilize the soil, and you water it appropriately, and it has a natural sunlight like it's supposed to, and it's not too much, and the soil's not dry, and you're tending to it, that seed is going to grow, because that is a natural law. It has the right conditions to sprout, to then grow. That's natural law. What is not natural is things like, and I'm using this as it, so please don't shoot the messenger, is using something like Miracle Grow. That's not natural. You are now using synthesis, and you are adding it. Will the seed grow? Yeah, it might grow, right? And instead of getting a normal sized watermelon, you get this giant watermelon. But as you know, or if you don't know, maybe here you go. They've shown that these fruits and vegetables that are grown with Miracle Grow, the larger a fruit gets or vegetable, it loses its nutritional value, because that seed was never intended to produce something that large before. And you do reach a tipping point, a breaking point, where it's no longer nutritionally of value, right? It's, you got a 12-foot zucchini, Well, it wasn't supposed to get past a foot, right? And so, and I say that because you have a lot of people right now that have gotten into gardening. They've discovered gardening during the pandemic, which is great. I'm all for, like, grow your own fruits, your vegetables, if you can, right? Even container gardening. But let's back off the miracle grow. Why? Because it's not natural. It is part of, you know, it will work with the natural process, but there comes a point in time where you're now superseding what is natural, and it's no longer of benefit to you. So when we talk about natural, don't think of positive and negative. It's not necessarily negative that the fruit is growing. That's positive. You're seeing growth, right? But at the same hand, it's kind of like, okay, well, now what do we do with this 12-foot zucchini? Like, who the hell's going to eat a 12-foot zucchini? That's what you need to think about. So don't think of positive and negative. It's what's going to, when we talk about what goes around comes around, and Amy's saying, you know, not punishment. We think of punishment as a negative. We have applied negative and punishment together to mean the same thing, and they don't. Here's one, and I want you to think, open your minds for a moment. Everybody opening their minds, they're thinking broadly. We're not thinking in our societal context. We're talking about gender, male and female, in their original. We're not talking about gender as it relates to sexuality or sexual genitalia. We are talking about the original concepts of gender in science. Okay. Male means to be an active force, right? It's something that produces, it's replicating, that sort of thing. Female was something that is a receptacle, right? It is that's how we get in Hermetic Kabbalah. We relate it to form and force, right? And so you've got one that's going and the other one that says, wait a minute, stop. Let's do something with all this energy that's already coming, right? So I want you to think, whenever you hear certain terms, go back and find out, what did it originally mean? What does natural law mean? What does law of attraction mean? Law means something that is naturally occurring in a certain state, right? It's like a written rule or unwritten rule. It's law, okay? And then you talk about attraction. What goes around comes around, or what I bring to me. What's interesting is you hear things like birds of a feather flock together, and then you hear things like opposites attract. So what's the right law? Because you're talking about laws here. So when we talk about law of attraction, don't think in terms of the attraction means something I want. Attraction means something positive. Attraction means I'm going to get wealthy. Think of it in terms of when I put something out, if that thing comes back to me in that matched energy. If I walk around all day and I'm happy and I'm bubbly and I just skate over things, right? How is that going to come back to me? And it's not always the positive. Like, you can have somebody, like, if I'm walking around and I'm happy and positive, you would expect, well, I'm going to get back what I'm putting out. So the people who come to me are happy and positive and we're uplifting. Well, that's one part of natural law. That's one part of law of attraction. The other part is you're going to attract the people who are offended by you. You're going to attract the people who are disgusted by you, who are irritated, who are triggered. That is also part of the law. So you're getting the matched energy, and then you're also getting the law of polarity, which is the opposite side. That thing that sits all the way on the opposite half of what you are, that's still going to be attracted to you. Why? It's all a spectrum. There is no one or the other. You're going to get both ends coming at you. So a lot of people, when something happens to them, they go, well, what did I do? I don't understand what happened. Why did this happen to me? I don't deserve this. I didn't do anything to do. What did I do? And what they're not understanding is it's not necessarily something that you put out that was so bad or evil or wrong or whatever you want to use, negative, that caused this negative thing to come towards you. It is that pureness of where you are. It's just the spectrum. The other end of the spectrum is attracted to you the same way. So your job is to kind of stay in that middle ground, to know, well, this thing is happening, not necessarily because something I per se did, but I'm going to attract both ends of the spectrum. It's not just, well, I'm all love and light and I walk around in my golden bubble and nothing can touch me because, I'm here. It's about being able to balance that duality. No, you're going to attract both sides of the poles, both sides of the spectrum. And you've got to be able to stay in that centeredness and go, okay, why is someone offended by my bubble, my white love and light, and everything's wonderful, right? You got to know how to see both, and to not, here's the biggest thing, take, this is part of the 4 agreements, take nothing personally. You cannot take anything personally. So when somebody comes at you and something's bad happening, you're not being punished, right? Well, sometimes you're being punished, but that's a different story. We'll do a different show on that one, because that one might get kind of triggering. So, you know, just know that in the normal day stuff, that's the law of attraction. It's not just I'm all white light, so I'm only going to attract white light. It's I'm going to attract both sides. Now, how the hell am I going to deal with it? That's the question.
Well, you learn from it. I mean, we're supposedly here to grow and learn from it all. And I think just reactions to some parts of these conversations we can learn from, you know, and the people themselves, or, you know, why does it trigger fear or upset or, you know, expectations? It kind of ruins some people's expectations. But I think it basically, it's like having a dialogue, you know, with people that you care about. You know, some things make you uncomfortable and some things, and you want to examine that, because what we put out in our mind, and by the way, I don't know anyone who's all love and light, right?
Certainly not us.
But we're always putting out certain energies, right? And what comes back and what comes up, you know, when you're aware of the symbolism, you learn from it. And
well, it's all about the middle way. It's all about being centered. It's all about, you know, in martial arts, it's your hara. When you see someone who's doing karate, they stand in a certain way in the horse position, because you want to be secure, because you will be buffeted from both sides. When I used to work in the film business, I realized you can't make everybody happy about anything. One of my jobs was feeding everybody. And you can put out the best stuff in the
100
world.
people.
100 people. There's always someone's going to complain, oh, there's too much steak, or there's not enough steak, or, you know, this filet mignon is not organic. You know, you can't.
We see that with the
Yeah.
oracles.
And I'm
When
sure
on
Jeffrey.
Amazon was like the card stock isn't right, the varnish isn't right, the size of the box is too big, it's too small. I mean, we all can share our opinions now, which is great. I mean, that's the age of Aquarius, right? We all kind of have a say.
But it's a new law, the cancel stuff. I'm sure when Jeffrey had his conferences, had 7,000 people at his conference, he might have had a complaint or two that would make your mouth like drop open. What? Like you're complaining about that? You know, when you're dealing with people, you know, I love people basically, but at the same time, growing up in law enforcement, I don't trust anybody, because you have to stand from a position of you're an emanation of God, but you might have had a bad day.
Well, isn't that like trusting God but lock your car?
Exactly, or tie your camel. Since we're
you know, the reality is, one of the reasons why I love hosting online events these days, particularly conferences, is because as the conference promoter / organizer, you know, and where we provide the content, if anyone complains about the food they're eating, it's on them. If they're having a bad Wi-Fi day, oh, it's on them. If they're having trouble seeing the screen, they should get a bigger screen. If there's local noise they're complaining about, it's also on them. And in fact, right, you know, all these issues, I'm able to shift from being facilitated, facilities based, to being experiential, but where we're not, I don't have to worry about that experience so much. And so, yes, people, the reason why I stopped taking surveys at my conferences, by the way, years ago, when people said you should survey your audience and find out what they liked about your event, if per chance on the last day of the conference, we had the lunch was cold, per chance, the entire conference was cold food. Like everyone complained about one thing. Or if the room was particularly cold on a certain day, they remembered that. They didn't remember the fact that we had 37 or 52 amazing speakers. No, they focused on one little thing which really bothered them. Or, you know, the fact that we had so many people at the Fairmont Hotel that we actually took down their phone system. This is back in 1998. Could you imagine everyone doing dial-out internet, and they didn't have enough capacity for everyone who's occupying the rooms to dial out at the same time, so their PBX basically broke. They blame that on me too. And so, you give people an opportunity to share their thought, and they amplify. So yes, I definitely can relate to give people a moment to reflect, and you get lots of feedback, most of which you don't expect. I typically like to hear nice things, but I'm
We do too.
Meanwhile, Lauren's the one who had to deal with it, right? Lauren, when they would call up the production office, you're like the POC.
Well, Lauren's very diplomatic,
She
which
is.
we all need to be now. I mean, everyone's not going to think the same thing or agree with
No,
everyone, but
that's
we
true.
should be open-minded to understand. I mean, that's what I love about astrology, because it describes all of us individually, and you have to kind of put yourself in someone, when you read a chart, you put yourself into someone else's shoes to kind of understand why they're that way, which might not be your energy, your frequency.
Yeah, but I got something that transcends it all. And this is the reason people come to Ask the Oracles, is to hear the really crazy shit. So here we go. Okay, so I have a book called Quantum Affirmations. And in Quantum Affirmations, it's scientific based on quantum physics. But I took most of that out of the book because everybody just wants to know, how can I make things better?
Cut to the chase.
Right. So let's face it. In quantum physics, they say that there are possible, probable futures implied from this moment. The question is, how do you get to the one you want? So I viewed consciousness as the smallest particle, because thank you very much, Joyce, for holding up the book, because for some reason
And
I don't.
Susan mentioned the book too.
Yeah, and okay, so this is why you come to Ask the Oracles.
Laura.
Thank you, Lauren. So consciousness is the smallest particle, smaller than light, smaller than quarks and mesons and all this other crap. So the consciousness obeys the same laws, we're talking about laws, as quantum mechanics. And so how do you get to the future? You quantum tunnel, which is, look it up, it's a real thing, and you quantum entangle, a real thing, which is Einstein calls spooky action at a distance, which is that if you touch two electrons together, take them to the other side of the universe, spin one, the other one spins.
Which again, we're all connected.
Right. And Einstein did not like it, even though he's one of the first quantum physicists. So how do we get to this future? You do a contemplate. First, you identify your goal. What do you want? Why didn't you get it? What's your gift?
Well, that's always key, really. What do you want?
Well, you want a better future. Okay. So everybody wants a better future. So you visualize the better future, and you see it with all the negatives. You see it with, I win the lottery, I'll find relatives I never knew I had. That's the basic one. And that's how you get to the future you want to go. And so there is a possibility, if I'm right, and not just another insane asshole on the internet, and if I'm correct about this, that means that even though the shit's hitting the fan everywhere else, your personal existence can be good. And that, I think, is what people want. And that's what I think. They don't want to be scared. They want to go into a future that's better. This is quantum affirmations is how to do it. We're all
participating in that, like the butterfly's wings. I mean, the more we make ourselves centered and secure and positive, the more that's all going to connect with everyone.
The butterfly thing is based on the work of Benoit Mandelbrot, which always reminds me of Mandelbread, which is a Jewish food. But he did chaos theory, and it was applied in his studies of weather. And so that's the butterfly effect. The butterfly, it's like saying someone getting a cold in China can affect the whole world, and that's what just happened. So that's a law that's true. Sorry, I touched on health. I'm very sorry. I apologize. And now I turn it over to Brandy and everybody else because I've talked long enough.
Well, I don't know what you want me to say. I mean, I agree with you.
Thank you.
I think
that's all I want anyone to say.
If we focus on the small things we can do, then it makes everything better. I mean, the small positive.
Yeah. And the big thing is I always tell clients, what are you doing for you?
Yeah.
Because if you hear the thing about if your cup is empty, then you can't pour from it. Okay, well, that's great. But what exactly are you doing? We were talking briefly before the show. I love books. I love to read. If I even on my Instagram have in my links, it has Brandy's book and deck wish list. And that book list gets longer and longer and longer. Because for me, it's not just about, oh, I have books. I actually read my books. I spend a considerable amount of time. I have twins, right? So I have the 17-year-old, and then I have twins that just turned 3. But when I have free time and I'm not with you wonderful people, I'm reading. Like, what can I learn? And then what can I expand upon that? And how can I apply it? People go and they learn things, but if you're not applying these things to your everyday life as much as you can, then what are you doing with it? Why are you even spending your time learning it if you're not going to apply it? Magic does not occur by opening a book. That is
No,
the
it's true.
foundations. Magic occurs by living, by applying. Even if you don't know what the hell you're doing, do something. You don't have to necessarily, you could sit down and say, I don't know anything about manifesting, but you know what? I'm going to sit down every day and I'm going to give you a real thing that I did. And this talks about law of attraction, attracting what you want by putting out again. And you did get the upside of this, right? But for instance, you sit down every day for 20 minutes on your car ride to work while you're teaching high school, because you just left law enforcement and this is what you want to do. You don't want to work in law enforcement anymore. You don't want to work major crimes. You want to work helping people. You were helping people before, but you want to help people in a whole new way. And guess what? You have a child and you always wanted more children, but you didn't have more children because you could literally be sent off in places that are not safe for other children, right? Or to have children, period. And that was not an option. 24/7, you were on call for worst of the worst case scenarios. So you decide, all right, I'm now teaching high school. I spend 20 minutes in my car every morning at the crack of dawn, the sun is coming up. On my way to work, I'm going to focus on what do I want in my life and how am I going to bring it? I am driving, so I have to stay conscious, right? I can't close my eyes and go off into my Neverland. And I'm going to focus on what do I want? How am I going to get there? What do I want? How am I going to get there? What's the best way to get there? I don't know the best way to get there. Well, I'm using that thought process. This is something I actually did. This is what brought about the twins. I actually started thinking about, you know what? I think I was 33 at the time. And I was like, man, you know what? It'd be sure nice if I just had twins, because I want 3 kids. If I just had twins, I could get it done in one time. I don't have to go through 2
So
pregnancies.
efficient.
Okay. So I started thinking, I want twins. I want twins. I want twins. Twins, twins, twins. I want to move. I only want to do a year of this middle stepping stone. I don't want to go beyond that. I want to be able to step into the business full time and do this, you know, as my full-time job. I need to be able to do this. So I started focusing on exactly what I wanted for my future. Why did I want it? Did I want it because of fame or fortune? No, that's not why I wanted it. I wanted it because I already raised 1 child while I worked full-time. I was in graduate school, all of these things. I was not present for a lot of my daughter's younger years, right? Because I was just constantly working. And so I started thinking about long-term and why. Because the important thing is when you think about law of attraction, also ask yourself, why do you want it? Because I guarantee you, if you want it for the wrong reasons, it's not going to be something that you're not going to attract what you want. And you're not going to attract it for long if you do. Because that's the other thing. People get what they want, or they attract what they want, but they don't hold on to it long enough because they didn't think about the ramifications. And this is where the natural law comes in. So I got my twins. Okay. But I also ended up sleep deprived for an entire year because I didn't think about the ramifications of twins. I didn't think about the ramifications of a lot of things when it comes to twins, and they're identical twin boys, right? Like I didn't think about a lot of things. I just wanted twins. So this is where we talk about, I know this sounds crazy, but natural law. What are you attracting it? Why do you want it? What are you doing to put yourself in alignment with that? And not to go into TMI, but I assume we're all adults in here, right? If you want to have twins, you have to have sex. Like that's part of it. So you have to have, you know, there's certain things that you have to do. People put things out there, but what are you doing to see it come to fruition? And are you thinking about the long-term ramifications of whatever it is? Because there may be things you don't think about. And you see people who get upset because they don't get what they want. Well, I've been trying to do this, and I've been doing this spiritual law of attraction and the secret. And I have so many clients that said, I've been focusing on this. And I've always asked the same thing. Why do you think it's not happening? If you're doing everything to make it happen, what in your brain is a reasonable explanation of why it's not happening? Well, I just don't deserve it. Or I'm just not good enough. Or God doesn't like me. And it's like, or maybe
God doesn't like me.
oh, I hear that a lot. I hear
Come on, really?
oh yeah. I hear God doesn't like me, I'm being punished, that sort of thing. I never
Really?
get what I
People
want.
are so hard on themselves.
It is. And it's like, take a step back and ask, first of all, is it in divine timing? Is it in universal timing? We don't plant a seed in it. Well, unless you use Miracle Grow, maybe. Maybe you need to sprinkle a little Miracle Grow on your magic. Like, you got to plant.
Or on your thing.
Well, I think, yeah, people have to be definite about what they want, but then they have to separate their attention from their intention and let it go, because there is a divine order. We don't want to,
Yeah,
you can't
and to
control,
know,
yeah.
and
I'm
to know
still with
some
like
things-
Naked in the Jungle twins. Naked in the Jungle twins.
Well, I will tell you, anytime you have a
You can't
conversation,
Which is harder? I don't know. I think the twins are harder than Naked in the Jungle.
Oh, our internet connection is unstable, it says.
yeah, you
Hey,
keep
listen,
freezing.
I think the law of attraction cards that we designed, I think we'll pull a collective card for today for everybody.
Receptivity
Being receptive. That's a big issue.
with the
Is
angels.
your heart open for what you're asking for? Are you making room for it in
And
your life?
And don't be afraid, and don't have a list of things, and don't expect it to come any certain way.
Yeah, be open in your mind and your heart.
God, this hour went really fast, except for the part where people started freaking out.
Happened.
Jeffrey, do you have some closing remarks?
No, other than thank you. Well, I do have lots, but I'll just leave it short and say I'm grateful for the opportunity for people to share time with us each and every week, for us to cover topics as best as we can, and to appreciate those around us, and to listen, and to not jump to conclusions, but to hear the voices being presented, and to give ourselves the opportunity to learn from each and every experience. And I thank you all for being part of today's show, for sharing your voice, and for being present. And I think we all have the opportunity to reflect, and have the opportunity to present, and to look forward to. And I've been pretty quiet listening. So I thank you all for maintaining and creating the space for us to be here. And Brandy, thank you for everything that you present. Monty and Amy, thank you guys too. And Lauren and Harry, thank you for what you do. I say this with love and light. I thank you all for being part of our show each and every week. And I could not think of a better place where I want to be on a Monday other than here at Ask the Oracles. And I thank all of you for participating, this people listening, people in the audience, and I thank you all for being here. So thank you.
Thank you for
Yes,
having me.
thank you, everybody.
Yeah, Brandy, I think you should be a great motivational speaker once the twins are a little bigger and the world opens up. Because I think you have a good presentation and you say the right stuff.
I
Thank
might
you,
have
Brandy.
a thing in
Thank
the
you,
works.
everyone.
Good.
Thank you.
Well,
Thank you.
because if it's Monday, Jeff, it's time for Ask the Oracles.
Thank you.